you so much for joining us today for our event Transitioning to Legal Practice in collaboration with EncycLAWpedia and Lawcate. My name's Heidi and I'm from EncycLAWpedia, and I'm joined today by Rak and Marky from Lawcate, who will be co-moderating the event this evening. I'd firstly like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. This event has been created as a collaboration between two Monash Law Ambassador groups, EncycLAWpedia and Lawcate. EncycLAWpedia was established in 2019, and we aim to help law students bridge the gap between study and practice. Our website and podcast series host a range of interviews with lawyers practicing in a wide range of legal sectors. We hope the insights and experiences shared by these working professionals will help to better inform students about available career paths as well as the realities of working within the legal field.
Whereas Lawcate aims to connect with and empower law students with opportunities to build employability skills, explore different resources, and to learn about career pathways in preparing themselves for the future. We currently have a website that contains a range of resources from students, ranging from past interviews to opportunities that students can engage in. The aim of this event is to explore the opportunities and pathways into the legal industry and get a better insight into the possible career options for you. Hopefully, by the end of the event, you might have a bit more knowledge about where your law degree might take you. If you have any questions about tonight's event, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will ask them if we have time at the end. Tonight, we have three panelists joining us, Alexandra, Sara, and Shruti. I might get Alexandra to start off by introducing herself.
Hi everyone, as Rak said, my name is Alexandra, feel free to call me Alex for short if you like. So I'm a recent graduate of Monash, so I graduated last year with a Bachelor of Law and Commerce with an economics major, so I'm very much fresh out of uni. I'm currently completing my graduate year at the Victorian Government Solicitor's Office, and I previously did a clerkship at the VGSO as well as 2 commercial clerkships. So I'm currently rotating through the litigation and dispute resolution practice area, primarily assisting in institutional abuse claims.
I'll jump onto you now, Sara.
Hi everyone, I'm Sara Ejtemai. I'm a solicitor in the banking and finance team at KWM. I did my graduate year in 2020, rotated through financial regulation and environment and planning, and I've just settled in financial regulation about a month ago. So I did my bachelor in environments, majoring in geography, before going to Melbourne Uni to do the JD. And my trajectory into commercial law and banking in particular is a good example of someone who started law school with a different area in mind, namely environmental law, and then through experiences, just kind of ended up here.
And lastly, Shruti.
Hi everyone, I'm Shruti. So I'm currently a senior consultant at KPMG in their regulation and compliance risk management team. So that's an internal business services, and I work to manage the Australian financial services licensing and also any business licenses. Before KPMG, I was actually at the Administrative Appeals Tribunal where I was an associate, and before that I was a paralegal at Slater and Gordon. I, like the others, have completed a Bachelor of Laws. I graduated last year in the middle of the pandemic. I did a double degree, so I did a Bachelor of Laws and Bachelor of Business. My majors were entrepreneurship and innovation, and like my business majors, I'm very much interested in just exploring all the different areas there are out there before I can kind of pick something that really interests me and stick down to become a bit of a subject matter expert in that area. And that's kind of where my journey's taken me so far.
Thank you all for those introductions. I guess we might now move on to our first substantive point, which is about your university experience / your work experience. So what do you guys think is the best way to gain legal experience and to improve employability prospects as a law student? For example, volunteering. Shruti, we might start off with you.
Sure, happy to. I think the best way to get legal experience is just to get involved. Get involved and try as many things as you can. Like if you're still in law school, do moots. I know it's very daunting, but it's a good way to build up your advocacy skills, to build your communication skills, learn how laws are applied. Even if it's not something you want to do, get involved tutoring if you did something really well in a subject and you think you can help others, go tutor. And another thing, if you're not sure about something, reach out to your lecturers as well and build a relationship with them.
Alexandra or Sarah?
I completely agree with Shruti. I think getting involved is the best way forward. I think go with what you're interested in, speak to your lecturers, check out the careers page or LSS career page, apply to as many things as you're interested in. And I know it can be discouraging because a lot of roles are competitive, but just keep putting yourself out there, reach out to people, reach out to organizations you're interested in. Like a lot of my volunteer roles happened because I just followed an organization, liked what they did, and caught up with them for coffees, and then volunteer roles just kind of fell into place. So I think put yourself out there, chat to as many people as you can.
And Alexandra, lastly.
Yeah, echoing what the others have said, I completely agree with that. I might also add that getting involved in experiences that aren't necessarily legal is also, I think, equally as valuable, to be quite honest. So obviously it is very competitive getting legal opportunities, especially while you're still a university student. But I found that a lot of my selling points, so to speak, in my applications or in my interviews were actually my non-legal roles. So getting involved in student societies, I was in the economics committee, so that really didn't have that much to do with law, but that's something that showed that I had leadership skills and communication skills, could work in a team. Equally, my retail job was actually a really big talking point during my clerkships, and I was quite surprised because I thought that maybe my legal job would be of more interest, but it was actually the retail job where I could say that I spoke with different customers, dealt with challenging situations, a fast-paced environment. They actually really appreciated that. So I guess I hope what that can reassure you of is that you don't necessarily need legal experience, especially early on in your career, and that you can find soft skills and demonstrate soft skills that are very applicable to the legal world outside of legal opportunities, so to speak.
Thank you all for that great insight. Moving on, what's one piece of advice you would give to yourself back in university? And Sarah, we might start off with you this time.
Sure. If I could go back and give myself a piece of advice in uni, it would definitely be to stress less and enjoy the process. And I remember going to panel events and hearing the same thing said to me, but I think it took graduating and getting a few experience in work to really understand the importance of it. Because I think, completing a legal degree and finding employment afterward is demanding and it is stressful. And you've got the same way you've got goals and targets to reach, I think also have checkpoints along the way every 6 months or a year, and just look back on everything you've done and everything you've achieved and feel good about it. I think it all goes by in a blink of an eye, and I know it is a stressful process, but everyone I know at uni found a role, they're happy, it all evened out in the wash, like everyone's gotten where they want to be. So I think I definitely have points where you reflect and realize that you're currently, living out what was once a goal and feel good about that. There'll always be more goals. Like as soon as you reach it, there's the next thing. So I think enjoy the process, enjoy the journey, have fun.
Thanks, Sarah. Alexandra, we might pass on to you now.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Sarah said. I think it's very easy to get stressed out about, am I doing enough? All these other people have got all these opportunities and all these people are doing that and they've got these leadership roles. Am I doing enough? Will I get a grad job at the end of it? I was very much stressing out at uni. And like Sarah said, everything works out. I'm now, 10 months out from uni, and all my friends have received graduate roles or just jobs generally, and they've all got something. And so I guess echoing what Sarah said, try to relax and enjoy your time at uni while you've still got it. I was really upset that my last week at uni, I was looking forward to all these fun activities, and obviously that didn't go ahead. So try to enjoy uni while you can. Another bit of more practical advice I'd say is what Shruti was saying in a first answer, which is it's probably do some moots. I never did moots at uni. I was really scared by them, but looking back now, I actually think they would have been a really great judgment-free environment, a really great way to build up some really practical skills. So that's the one piece of advice that I'd give myself.
Shruti, over to you.
Sure, I think Sarah and Alexandra covered a lot of it really. just thinking back to what advice I'd give to myself back in uni, definitely get involved more as well, because there's so much more to you as a person and employability wise as well than just your grades. Like, yes, grades are important. You can get a lot of good things from it, like scholarships, opportunities, but there's also other ways you could develop yourself. And like Sarah was saying, get involved, have fun, because that also adds to your character. Something else I would wish I could do if I was back in uni was actually reach out for help. And I know there'd be times, because I was working almost full time, I had my volunteering work, I was also studying full time. So I would often feel that, I just have to get it all done. And if I could go back, especially in the earlier years of my uni, I would talk to my lecturer and be like, actually, I don't understand this. It's taking me too long. Can you help? And I remember I started doing that like maybe 3-4 years into my course, and it just changed my whole outlook of studying. Because at law, again, especially I think now that we're all virtual, it can feel a little isolating. And it's a lot of work, and it can feel difficult to reach out for help as well. But reach out to your friends, offer to teach them something, offer to have study groups, and reach out to your lecturers with questions.
Yeah, really good answers. I definitely resonate with the probably should stress less during the experience, university experience. So we'll now move on to your transition from university to your work life. Do you have any tips on finding legal opportunities or positions, such as any platforms you used? We might start with Alexandra.
Yeah, as I'm sure we all know, it can be really difficult to find positions just because of the sheer amount of people applying for roles. I think that's something that I'll be quite honest that I got my first legal position through a friend at uni who was actually resigning from his role and told me about an opening, and so I learned of the opportunity. I still applied along with everyone else, but I guess that just demonstrates the importance of networking. And obviously he's a friend, but reaching out to people like that and making those connections means that they might be able to think of you in the future for available positions. So that's I think that's one way that you can seek out legal opportunities. Another one that I found quite useful was I know Monash at least, and I'm sure other universities will have the same idea, of having some kind of career university career gateway platform. So I know Monash uses Career Gateway, and that's where I saw a lot of legal opportunities popping up. I'm also quite sure that most unis will offer some kind of placement, and that was sort of my plan going into, I think, about 3rd and 4th year, that I was going to apply for the placement opportunities that uni offered. So those would be my 3 tips.
Okay, we might hear from Sarah next.
Yep, I completely agree with Alex. I think utilizing the uni resources, the career pages, checking LinkedIn, Seek, all those platforms. And I think reaching out to people, I mentioned before, I was always interested in environmental law, and the way I got my first volunteering opportunity was, I remember I applied to a few places, got rejected, was feeling down, and I reached out to Environment Victoria, which is a non-for-profit organization campaigning, and they had a local event to engage with the community, and I went there and reached out to the organizer of the event and asked if I could get a coffee with her, and said that I was really interested in the area. I'm doing law, I did Bachelor of Environment before, and asked if they take on volunteers for research, and they usually don't. They usually do more things like community engagement and door knocking closer to elections, but she said, why not? And I ended up like helping her out half a day a week for 6 months, and then that led me to a more legal role with Environment Justice Australia, just from meeting people through that space. So I think putting yourself out there, just chatting with people, you never know where it might lead to.
And Shruti?
I think that's an excellent way to actually, get to know what area you're interested in as well, Sarah. Like, you discover a lot just by talking to people who work in those areas.
Absolutely.
My tips on finding legal opportunities or positions would be to apply for expressions of interest. So there's quite a few firms that always have expressions of interests open online, and you often wonder like, oh, they'll never contact you back. But the thing is, they do. that's how I kind of got started. I applied at Slater and Gordon and I popped in an expression of interest, and it wasn't until 9 to 10 months later that I heard back, and they had a big discovery matter that was coming along and they wanted paralegals for it. So I started in that. It was a short project, but I expressed an interest to stay and they found another position for me to stay in. And that's kind of how I moved around from different teams within the firm. Like I started out in employment and industrial law. I went to personal injury, went to superannuation, and then I eventually ended up in class actions and commercials and estate litigation. And I learned so much from every single one of those teams. I know Allen's has an EOI on the website because they're always looking for e-discovery paralegals. They can just call on you. Community legal centres are another great way to reach out, because these community legal centres, they're always looking for people to help out, and they are really good resources to actually get involved and do some legal work. You'll be on calls to clients, you'll be drafting memorandums, you'll be taking notes and attending meetings. So it's really hands-on experience.
Thank you, Shruti. So there are so many law pathways out there. Do you have any tips on how a law student should begin deciding which path to go down? We might start with Sarah this time.
Sure. I would say just try as many things that interest you. You're not going to know until you try. And I think speaking to professionals, reaching out, getting coffees, hearing about what their days are like, what type of work they cover, you start to understand what you like and what suits you. And I think just going from there, just pick an area and apply. Get involved, chat to people. I think that's the best way forward.
Thanks, Sarah. And Shruti, we'll go to you next.
I am going to echo what Sarah said. I think practice is very different to law school. I think, do Alexandra and Sarah agree to that? It's very different, and really the only way you will get to know without actually working in those areas is to talk to people who work in those areas. And one of the good ways to do that is reach out to them and tell them you want to have a chat. But an additional tip I'll add on top of that is to have very specific questions that you want to ask them. Try and tailor those questions to what you really want to know about it. Like, does the work get repetitive after a while? What's difficult about working in this area? Things that you're really curious about. So you're not meeting up and having a chat to them just to hear what they have to say, but you're getting your questions answered. Like if you're looking for challenging work, ask them, you've been in this area for 5 years. Do you feel challenged even now, every day? If you're looking for a work-life balance, ask them, what would you say your work-life balance is like? Is it difficult to maintain? Things like that. And when you ask those kinds of specific questions, it'll open up more avenues of conversations and within those topics, and you'll get to learn more about the area itself.
And Alexandra?
Yeah, it's all been pretty much covered, to be quite honest. I completely agree with what Shruti was saying just now in terms of asking questions of people, and those are the kinds of questions that I was asking, which when I was trying to decide what kind of area I wanted to go down. And I also agree that I think whilst doing subjects at uni and thinking, oh, I think I like this subject versus this subject, that can definitely be a good guide. In reality, there may be more to this subject than you'll learn at uni, and you may actually like a subject in practice as opposed to in theory. So those are things to keep in mind. So while uni can be a good guide, just because you didn't like a subject at uni doesn't mean you won't like it in practice. But yeah, asking those kinds of questions, and where possible, getting the opportunity to get practical experience.
I think also adding on to what Alexandra said, don't be disheartened if you haven't found something you want to do at the end of your law degree. Like, I'll be the first one to put my hand up here and say, I don't actually know what I want to do. I'm at KPMG, but I'm still very much in that exploratory phase of my professional life. Like, I chose to come here because I haven't worked in the financial services and licensing space before. I've done personal injury, I've done commercial and estate litigation, class actions. This is very much new to me, and I want to know if I'd like to stay. So you could be you know, 5 years into your professional career as well and still be like, I don't enjoy it. Let me try something else.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Shruti just mentioned now. And I'd say as a graduate as well, you're really encouraged to reach out to other teams, even outside of your rotation, to keep experiencing things as a junior. And it's totally okay to graduate and even start a role and still want to explore other areas. And I think it's really good to do that in the first few years of your career, especially with the law where there's so much overlap between areas. I think it just adds to your skill set. So I completely agree with what Shruti just mentioned.
So interviews can be a particularly stressful stage within a law student's journey. Do you have any interview tips? We'll start with Shruti.
Oh, sure, they are the most daunting thing, but I swear once you do enough, you do kind of get used to it. And my biggest interview tip would be to Google behavioral interview questions. Make a list of the most common ones, because no doubt when you're going through interviews, you will get some variation of them. And something that's really helped me is making a table out of that. And behavioral interview questions are looking for examples, essentially, of where you, like, tell me about a time you X, Y, and Z. So when you make that table, add to as many scenarios as you can think of that you've been in that answer that question, and just, I guess, familiarize yourself with your experience. And when it comes to that question in the interview, you feel natural because you know exactly what your options are that you can talk about, and you know your situation. And that's, I guess, the other tip that I would give, like, stick to something real, something that's happened to you. Don't exaggerate or underplay it, because it's much easier when you kind of play on what's really happened to answer follow-up questions, because you will get them as well. So know your experiences, write them down, and review them, especially if you're going through interviews and applications. So when you get a question, you don't have to think a lot about it. You know it. You know your story. You know how to tell it. And you appear confident because you don't need to, you know, think or stop or, you know, wonder at all.
Okay, we might go to Alexandra next.
Yeah, I completely agree with Shruti. Again, brainstorming examples of past experiences that you've had. I might add to that, and I'd say that in the interviews, try to tie back to what the end result of that experience was, and or what the significance of it was. For example, if you participated in organising a committee event, mention the fact that this, you know, it required a lot of teamwork, a lot of communication skills, liaising with different parties, making that kind of connection, and that will help employers sort of go, oh, okay, even though this activity seems unrelated, I now understand the skills that are required and how they might apply to the role that we're talking about here. I might also add as another tip, which is prepare for different interviewing styles. So when I was going through the clerkship process, I actually had a couple of very different interviews. So one was the very typical behavioural structure, kind of give us a time you did this, describe a time you did that. But then I had a couple of interviews that were very free flowing and almost didn't feel like an interview. They were just a conversation of, how's your day going today? What do you do in your spare time? And it's almost difficult to figure out what kind of questions they're asking with that. But I guess the whole point of that is trying to slip in experiences where possible. But my understanding is I think that they're kind of gauging your personality and your general demeanour and how you can present yourself in front of a client, for example, and how you might work in a team with the people who are interviewing you. So I think being prepared for those different kinds of interviewing styles is also something to keep in mind.
And Sarah?
Yes, I completely agree with everything Alex and Shruti just mentioned. I think my two tips would be being prepared. Think about why you want this role. Think about what you can bring to the role and the organization, and definitely remind yourself of your experiences. Review your cover letter, review your CV, and brainstorm those scenarios for behavioral questions linking to themes like leadership, communication, resilience, different scenarios where you demonstrated those traits. And my second tip would be genuine, bring your own personality, let that shine. Employers want to see who you are. And so I think speak about what interests you and just be yourself.
Were there any electives or experiences which influenced your career path? So I'm aware that you're all in different sort of areas, so we've got corporate law, government and consultancy. So would you mind expanding a little bit on what drew you to that particular area? We might start with Sarah.
Sure. I'm trying to remember what electives I did. I think mine were a mix of, I did some environmental law ones and I did some commercial law ones. I think one was actually called Commercial Law in Practice. And also did some involving cross-border. So I did deals in Asia Pacific and economic business law in Asia, which I really enjoyed. And all the commercial law subjects I took were taught by previous corporate lawyers. So I think it was a really great way to hear from them, hear from their personal experiences about the type of work they did in their careers and get advice from them through their lectures. And I think, yeah, it definitely encouraged me to apply for clerkships and led me to where I am today. So I think, yeah, explore your interest through elective subjects. And I'd say they were the most, I had more fun in my elective subjects than my core subjects, for sure.
We might go to Shruti next.
Sure. My electives were actually a lot of IP subjects. So I did trademark, patents and copyright law, and they were very challenging, but I didn't kind of see myself working in that area. I also did competition and consumer law and refugee law, and I was exposed to a little bit of that when I was at the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, and it helped me to understand a lot more of what was involved in practice because I was on the other side of the bench there. I got to look at the submissions, I got to watch the barristers practice and advocate for their clients, and I got to understand really the limitations of the law and the impact that you can really make. And I guess at the end of the day, it kind of helped me understand, like, look, here's what I want to do, and here's how, working in this area would help me, and here's how I couldn't make the impact I wanted to make. And it really helped me to kind of understand, like, okay, here's what it's like in theory, here's what it's like in reality, and here's what I want to do with it. And to kind of cross-match that, what I want to do and what really happens, you have to be really honest with yourself and be like, okay, realistically, I can probably do something, make an impact somewhere else, and then find it. And so in that sense, I guess my electives that I chose didn't really lead me to consulting, but more helped me identify, here's an area of interest. It's a stepping stone. Look at people that work in that area and understand what working in that area is like, and then identify whether it's something I want to do. And ultimately it wasn't. And so I've kind of pivoted into something new that I haven't learned about before, but it's something new, it's something I'm learning, it's something I'm enjoying working in. So it's a journey.
And Alexandra.
Yeah, to be quite honest, I actually didn't really have much of a strategy, or I didn't really give much thought to the electives that I was selecting. It was honestly just like, this sounds interesting, let's give this a crack. I actually did most of my electives on exchange. I went to Austria for exchange, and the electives that I took there, whilst very interesting, I did space law, I did the Austrian legal system. As you can imagine, just from those titles, not necessarily applicable to much legal practice in Melbourne, but nevertheless, I enjoyed them very thoroughly, and they're always very good talking points whenever I'm mentioning my time on exchange. But that meant that I had a very limited amount of space to do electives in Melbourne, and so I just chose subjects that seemed interesting to me. So I didn't, it didn't particularly guide my choice to go to government law or to not take a path elsewhere. My main sort of shaping experience in terms of what made me decide that I wanted to go to the VGSO was, it actually started off with the careers fairs. That's a piece of advice that I'd give: go to careers fairs and talk to people. That's where I found out about the VGSO. I talked to people who were there, they discussed the work that they do, and I thought, this sounds great, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring for a clerkship there. and then actually doing the work and figuring out, oh, okay, government law isn't just admin law, it isn't just constitutional law. Nevertheless, there were areas that I really enjoyed at uni. But government law actually encompasses a lot of different areas of law because they basically do everything for the government. So equally, you'll need employment lawyers there, you'll need commercial lawyers there, you'll need property lawyers there. So I guess I decided to go to the VGSO because I thought, oh, okay, you get to try everything there. And there'll be a spot for you, whatever your interests are. So yeah, no real strategy of the electives, unfortunately, but I had my fun anyway.
I can definitely concur with the whole government law, especially admin law. It's definitely not all you learn in admin law class. There's so much more to it.
The next question will be directed to you, Shruti. Because I'm aware Sarah and Alexandra took the clerkship graduate program path. So what are some legal pathways outside of graduate programs?
Oh, there are so many, and I wish I'd known about some of these, and I wish other people knew about them as well, because something I didn't know back in uni was that graduate pathways are really, they have a big commercial focus. And, you know, you can see with Sarah as well, and Alexandra, I'm sure you've done a commercial rotation as well. They do have a lot of commercial focus, but other pathways outside graduate programs, so you can take up a legal assistant or a paralegal job in a firm. Again, they don't have to be big firms. Smaller firms, suburban firms always look for paralegals as well. And you can start your way up there. I know people that have started as paralegals and now they're associates and senior associates, and they've stuck with the firm. They've gotten to grow with the firm. You can, I'm not sure if you know, but alongside, after you finish law school, you also have to do a practical legal training course. And that's something a lot of people do when they're going through their graduate year. I think that's something Sarah and Alexandra might be doing at the moment as well. So an option that students have is to actually complete that by themselves outside of a graduate program. And once they complete it, they can actually apply for first year lawyer positions, because you would, once you finish that course, you have to go and become admitted to the Supreme Court. It's a fairly straightforward process. And then you're deemed a lawyer, and you have a conditional license where you have to be supervised for 2 years before you can practice by yourself without supervision. So that's a really good pathway that people don't know about. And I'm sure when you're looking online as well, you'll see a lot of listings for first year lawyers, 0 to 2 PQE. I've had friends who started off and were law clerks in uni, and that's how they kind of got involved and identified they wanted to work in a particular area. So whilst they were law clerks, they finished uni, and once they were admitted as lawyers, their employers decided to keep them and bump them up to a lawyer position. They obviously had that head up, they had that advantage because they'd been working with the firm and they were working as lawyers, and other people moved on. So I would say, you know, keep your mind open. There's a lot of opportunities out there. There'll be so many you haven't heard of. I hadn't heard about my role before I, you know, heard about it. And I've come across so many people at KPMG who have law degrees that don't practice as lawyers. They decided law wasn't their thing, and they've utilised those skills that they learned into other areas that they're passionate about. And like they say, I think law is a very versatile degree, yes, but you also need to know how to bend it to what interests you. So once you find out what you like to do, what interests you, you can pick out the skills you've learned from law, whether it's been from your experiences in your degree or whether you've been a lawyer and you want to move on to a non-lawyer role, and fit it into what you're applying for. It's like what Alexandra and Sara were saying earlier as well. You have skills, you have a lot of skills that you bring, you have a lot of experiences, all of them, they make up you, and you can advocate for yourself that way.
Yeah, I might just ask whether Alexandra and Sarah have anything to add to that.
All I can say is that one of my friends actually went down the PLT pathway, so didn't go for any graduate jobs or anything like that, just went straight into the PLT course and found a first year lawyer position pretty much as soon as she finished with that. So yeah, I can concur. There's, you know, plenty of opportunities out there, even if you don't go for a grad job or if you don't get a grad job.
Absolutely. And I'd say there's no one right path, and no one really has that. So I think in your career, be open, see where it takes you. And I think, definitely out of law school as well, see where it leads you. As Shruti and Alexandra mentioned, the PLT path is a great one. And there's a lot of alternative pathways out there for jobs and positions that you don't even realize exist when you're a student until you start applying and until you graduate. And like I mentioned before, and I'm sure with Shruti and Alexandra, it's the same. Everyone I knew who graduated got a role somewhere, and a lot of them were at positions that they didn't know, but they are really happy about. So it really all does work out. There's a lot out there, and a law degree equips you really well with a fantastic skill set that will take you to a lot of places.
Thanks for all of that, guys. I'm sure that gives students a lot of hope about what their pathways might be apart from the traditional route. So we might move on to looking at life after law school. So how was your transition to full-time work? Did you find it was much different to your time at law school? And is being in your current role in the legal field as stressful as everyone makes it out to be? We might start off with Shruti.
Wow, this is a good question, and it's a little bit different because I was working full-time whilst in uni, so it wasn't much different for me. I think back in uni I had more priorities and more commitments, so kind of coming out of it, it's freed up my time a little bit more. But then at the same time, especially now that we're in lockdown, it can get a little hard to disconnect from work because there's always work to be done, there's always deadlines, there's always projects. I am very thankful that, my workplace encourages a good work-life balance, and my team is encouraged to log off at the end of the day, pick work up the next day. But I guess something I'm kind of learning right now is that there'll be good days and bad days, and every day is a different kind of productive. There'll be days where I wake up and I'll be a machine and I'll get 10 things done in a day. And then there'll be days where not everything's going my way and I'll get about 1.5 things on my to-do list done. And that's okay too. Like, we're all human, as corny as that sounds. And everyone's best looks different every single day. And you kind of have to learn to be okay with that. And something else that's, I guess, helping me now that I'm just, full-time working alongside my other extracurriculars is learning how to prioritize well. Because that's a key skill you really need in the workplace, because you'll have competing priorities. You'll have people coming to you for different things. Just identifying your priorities at the top of your day, and then working around that.
Thanks for that. Sarah, we might move on to you now.
Sure. So from a commercial law perspective, I think if you do a clerkship, it generally prepares you pretty well, because your first few months in a grad role, you still have that very structured level of training and kind of easing you into the teams. So I remember my first week was with my grad group at the College of Law, and we had a full week of PLT, and then the next week was a full week of training at the firm, and then the following month was just different training sessions, half days, and different blocks. So you do get eased into it. That being said, it's not necessary to do a clerkship, and I think law school does prepare you pretty well for full-time work. And I think in some ways it is easier because once you are finished for the day and you log off, you're done. Whereas I remember at uni, there's always that guilt of, oh, should I do more? Should I keep, should I get on to the next assignment? Should I apply for this position? What else can I do? So in that sense, it is easier because you just got like one thing, and when you do log off, you feel like it's done. But definitely what Shruti said applies, and I think in this working from home context, it is important to set boundaries and remember to log off and separate that in your life, and you do take on more responsibility as you graduate and you start your career, and so you do keep challenging yourself. So I think it is better than uni. Like, you're still challenging yourself, you're building your skill set. Yeah, I think law school does prepare you pretty well for full-time work.
Anything to add, Alexandra?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think the best part about working full-time is being able to properly switch off when you're done. So you might have sort of less time because you're working all the time, as opposed to, I know that for me, for example, I had very limited contact hours at uni, so it felt like I had more free time than I do at working full time, but my mind was always switched on thinking, oh, I have to do this assignment, I've got this exam to prepare for, I've got this university activity that I've got to do. So being able to switch off when you're done at work is a really good feeling. And I definitely agree that it's really important to set those kinds of boundaries, especially when you're working from home. I'd say that one thing that I noticed going into full-time work, especially as a grad, is definitely the increased responsibility. But with that, the tasks were a little bit more different. So I think at uni we kind of get used to doing research and writing assignments. But as a grad, I've noticed that I've been doing a lot more practical work. Obviously you'll do research, especially as a grad, but drafting documents that you don't really come across very much at uni at all. Drafting particular memos, drafting letters to clients, drafting affidavits, preparing court submissions, activities like that you may not be super familiar with at uni, or at least I wasn't. That's something that I've really enjoyed learning about so far.
Great, thank you. And I guess sort of just mixing back uni and work, are there any major skills or strategies, I guess, that are assumed when you start out as a graduate and aren't really taught? Sarah, we might start off with you.
Sure. What comes to mind, I think managing your capacity is a big one, and communicating with your team. I think, when you start in commercial law as a grad, you get your supervising partner and your supervising coach, and they do manage your capacity. But I think in this working from home environment where you're working with them, but also other people in your team, other teams, you might put your hand up for pro bono opportunities. I think a lot of times when you get a task, things like how long you should spend on it, when it's due, things like that get lost. And I think communicating with your team, what else you've got on your plate, how much time you should allocate, what to prioritize, when to bring it up when other people have work for you. I think it's something I never really thought about as a law student. I think the rest, like legal research and drafting memos and stuff, you are prepared pretty well, but managing capacity, and I think they do mention it in training, but I think it's just something you have to do yourself and consciously ask every time you speak with someone giving you a task. And I think especially in this working from home environment, so communication on that is key, and no senior wants junior lawyers overwhelmed with work. So I think sometimes it's just as simple as asking those questions and saying you have XYZ on your plate and this thing has blown up and you might need to reprioritize, and they'll help you with that. And that learning how to manage my capacity as a junior in my first year made my life a lot easier, and I wish I knew that in my first few months.
You might move on to you now, Alexandra.
Yeah, I agree. I think asking those questions is a really, really important thing to be able to do. So I think the three questions that I ask whenever I receive a task is, how much time do you want me to spend on this? Because it's very easy to go down a rabbit hole for 7 hours and then find out they just want a really quick answer that'll only take you 1 hour to come up with. Second question is the deadline. And thirdly, what kind of mode or format do you want this in? A quick email, or do you want a lengthier memo on it? And yeah, reaching out if you're low on work and talking to your supervisor about it, but equally being able to say no when things are a little bit difficult. And what Sarah mentioned, being able to reprioritize. For example, a task may seem urgent, but it may not necessarily be. So if something else pops up and you feel like there may be a little bit of leeway on the deadline, feel free to reach out if you feel comfortable and say, hey, this thing has popped up. This appears to be quite urgent. Is it okay if I push this back by a day or so? And usually they're okay with it. But being able to gauge whether it's possible to do that or not, I think that's a skill that you should be developing over time. I think one thing that is assumed is probably your research skills and your legal analysis and sort of critical thinking. Most of the time you're going to get a question, a legal research question that isn't something that you can just check in a textbook from uni or checking your uni notes. So being able to use the resources that are available to you, such as textbooks, such as case law databases, I think that's a skill that's kind of assumed that grads would have because you're fresh out of uni. I think senior solicitors kind of like to give the research tasks to grads because they know that we're quite efficient with that kind of work. And I think another skill that you kind of assume to know is being able to provide answers, so communicate clearly, which I'm clearly not doing very well at the moment, but being able to communicate really well, both written and orally, so writing things concisely.
And Shruti?
I think Sara and Alexandra have kind of covered everything, but I was going to say something I heard, I'm not sure where or from who, was it was someone very senior. I remember them saying that as grads, they're not expecting you to know anything at all. You're here now as a grad because you've shown that, you have the potential, you've shown that you can communicate, hold a conversation, you've shown that, you've gotten through uni, which means you can clearly do the work. But when you kind of start off as a grad, especially someone new in a company, they don't expect you to know everything. They'll train you in everything you do. But I really resonate with what Alexandra was saying. There are some things that obviously you've been chosen for, like your communication, your organization, and what Sara was saying about, managing your capacity, because that's something very important. So I think something assumed, a skill that's assumed that they would have would be to communicate. If you're struggling, communicate. If you need support, to communicate that. If you are not enjoying something, or if you don't understand something, communicate it. That's a lesson I learned at Slater and Gordon. I was given a task. I wasn't told, and I didn't ask, how long to spend on it, or when the deadline was, or what form they wanted it in. So that's a very, very helpful trick, Alexandra. I wish I'd known that then. But I remember at the end of the day, I went to the partner and I'm like, here's what I've got. He had a quick look and he's like, no, this isn't relevant. And I remember I went back the next day and I was like, can you maybe give me some feedback? And he's like, this was a very, very niche topic. You likely wouldn't have found anything online. And if you hadn't found anything, that in itself is an answer. So maybe next time, if you're struggling with something, if you're not finding anything, knock on my door, ask me, hey, I've hit a bit of a roadblock. Here's what I've done. Can you point me in the right direction? And I couldn't have just told you, well, if you haven't found anything yet, you probably won't find anything. And that was a very, very brilliant lesson that I have never forgotten to date. So communication, just talk about it. Because at the end of the day, your managers, the people you work with, they're all there to support you.
Yeah, fantastic. That's all really good advice. We've had a couple of questions in the chat. So the first one is, what are the advantages and disadvantages of the different pathways, which you touched on earlier? Specifically, what should guide you in choosing which path to take? We might start with Alexandra.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's hard for me to say because obviously I've only got my experience of working in a grad program at the VGSO, so it's hard for me to compare. But I guess one advantage that I really liked about going to the VGSO or doing a grad program more generally was being able to do rotations in the particular areas that I was going through. So this is coming from someone who didn't really know exactly what area of law I wanted to do, but I know that other people, for example, might have gotten a lot more experience at uni in a particular area of law, and they know that this is exactly the kind of area that they want to do. So maybe a grad program might be a disadvantage for them because they don't want to rotate through a lot of different areas. They want to start focusing from day one on the particular area of their choice. I also like, I guess the other advantage of a grad program for me has been the additional support that's been provided. So I like the structure, I guess, of the grad program. So I've really liked that. But that being said, if you don't like black letter law, for example, you might enjoy the sort of dynamics and the different kind of work you might get to do in consulting, for example. So I suppose, Shruti, you might be able to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, we might jump to Shruti then.
Sure thing. So I think that's a very good question to ask, because that's, I guess, also the downside of having a lot of options. You never know which one's right for you, and you never know which one to go to. And I think it's something I struggle with as well, because I'm a very curious person. I'd love to know what it's like to be a graduate at VGSO and working in banking and finance at KWM, even though I hated banking and finance elective. When I was doing my PLT, I kid you not, I had to draft something and I fell asleep on my desk.
I didn't even take it, if that helps.
I took it so I could find out if that's something I could do. And straight away I was just like, no, I cannot do banking and finance. But no, I think to ask yourself, I think what's been helping me, and again, just being mindful that I am still figuring this out myself, has been reflecting a lot on my experiences. So something I started this year, and just a few months ago actually, was I started a journal. I started a professional journal, and I did a bit of an exercise where I wrote down all the work that I've done for the different experiences I've had, anything that I can remember. And I wrote down the organizations, the cases that I worked on, what I enjoyed, what I didn't enjoy. And I slept on it for a couple of days, and I came back to it, and it really put things into perspective that, okay, all the things I'm enjoying have been things that have, challenged me, things that I got to learn from, things that I didn't know about before. It helped me make an impact. So I kind of, at the end of it, the point of the reflection was to kind of help me understand what my values were. And I've been kind of using that to kind of guide the work I ask for at work. Like, I'm looking for something that challenges me. I'm looking for something that helps me improve my communication skills and my public speaking skills. So really reflecting on what you have enjoyed and what you want to work on more will help guide the decision you want to make as to which path you want to go down. I'm not sure if that helps, but I hope it does.
Yeah, I think that's helpful advice. We might jump to Sarah now.
Sure. I think what was said about the rotations, I think really resonates with me. Like, I started my graduate program, and I was pretty set on settling in the environment and planning team, and I had clerked in the team and paralegalled in the team, and really liked the work and the way the team works. And I put down banking just to see what it was like. I knew nothing about banking and finance at all, and was put in financial regulation, and I had no idea what the team really did. And here I am now. I really grabbed me. I really liked it, and had it not been for rotations, that I wouldn't even have experienced this area. So I think doing rotations as a junior is great, because you get to see what other areas there are and what you like. I also think the support and training offered from the firm is phenomenal. And I think, even now, like, I'm settled in banking, and we have training on different areas of banking, transactional banking, capital markets, a lot of it goes over my head, but hopefully some of it sticks. And also the support from your grad group, because you go through it all together, and you form a really good bond. And as people progress in their careers and end up in different places, you have a friendly face and someone who you went through the graduate program with. And I think also with corporate law, you get exposure to different types of law, so advisory, transactional, and litigious work. And no stress at all if you're not super clear on the distinctions. And I think that's the beauty of the clerkships. You get to experience that, you get to learn about that, and you get to try that out and see what you're drawn to and what's best for you.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm wary of the time, so we might go a little bit of a shortened question. What does your day generally look like? So what sort of work do you do within your roles? We'll start with Shruti.
Sure. So I'm working on a few projects at the moment. So usually it's switching between those, and then there'll be times where the client-facing business will just come up with a question that they have. So I'll need to, reprioritize and move things around to answer their questions, which will lead me down, another rabbit hole, which could be another project. So it's very different on a day-to-day basis. But there is, some form of consistency, because we get to work on about 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 projects and manage that in our own times.
Alexandra?
As a grad, I think it really depends on the kind of work that others need you to do. So you're kind of there as, at the very least in my experience with BGS, you're kind of there as sort of a resource point. So people from different areas of your team will reach out depending on the kind of work that they've got and the kind of help they need from you. So as Shruti said, for me, it changes, maybe not so much on a day-to-day basis. So I'll probably have a couple of tasks that go on for several days, but on a week-to-week basis, on a month-to-month basis, it definitely changes. A lot of the time it'll be doing research memos. It might be drafting documents such as affidavits or briefs to council, or even having a go at some written submissions and advices. It might be going to some meetings, observing some hearings, and most of the time it'll involve some kind of team call, whether it be with my team or whether it be some fellow grads for about 10 to 15 minutes just to have a quick catch up. So it's a good day at work.
And Sarah?
So my main tasks generally revolve around doing case law research or drafting a memo, as financial regulation is mainly an advisory team. And so as a junior, you might be asked to, I think initially when a client asks a question, you'll get a call from a senior and they'll go through the client, the background, the key regulations, and they'll set out like step 1, look at the explanatory memorandum, step 2, consider this ASIC reg guide, et cetera, and they'll, coach you along the way. And then as you, progress and you do that a few times or over a few months, you start to kind of skip those processes, and you might have a first go, you do the research, and then you have a first go at drafting that section of the advice. Or if it's, a shorter question that can be in an email, you might have a go at drafting that email and, making it really short and succinct for the client, applying it to their business. And then you start, drafting advices. And, occasionally now I'm at the level where, I might get forwarded the email from the client directly and just say, have a go. And then you get to, do your own research and pull out the key issues and form your own opinion. And then I go back to, my supervisors and run everything past them and get their opinion and get their analysis. So those are the main tasks I do. And then also attending client calls. So I think when you're a junior, it's more just to take notes and be in the room and absorb everything. And then as you get more senior, you might be, not in a scary way, but like more involved in the call to like answer some questions or, start actioning items right after the meeting without your coaches telling you like step by step. So I think that's just, it just happens naturally over the years.
Great. Thank you all so much. I just wanted to say a quick sort of roundup message. Just on behalf of everyone here tonight, all the attendees and everyone from EncycLAWpedia and Lawcate, I would just like to thank each of our panelists, Shruti, Sara and Alexandra, for sharing your experiences transitioning to legal practice. I know I definitely gained a lot of insights and some really great tips, and we hope that the information shared tonight has been useful to you, everyone, and will inform your own journey into the legal profession. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the different practice areas and insights, please check EncycLAWpedia's law guides on their website and also their new podcast series, and also follow them on their socials. I think the link has just been put in the chat for that. And if you're interested in locating other opportunities, events and resources, please feel free to jump on Lawcate's website. We have a range of blog articles, a YouTube channel with several interviews with diverse legal professionals and other resources as well. Tonight's recording will also be available on EncycLAWpedia and Lawcate's websites if you all want to have another watch after this. But yeah, thank you everyone for coming along tonight, and thank you again to our panelists, Sara, Shruti and Alexandra, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.